Hey guys, welcome to Sony Simplified, the show that gives you simple tips and tricks on how to get most out of your Sony product. I'm your host, Dinesh, and today I have Josh who will be helping me with the presentation. That. All right, so on today's episode, we will be discussing how to shoot in low light, right, using ISO, shutter speed, and aperture, right? Shooting in low light can be very challenging. Getting blurry images, maybe it's too dark, too bright, can't figure out why. Well, today we will talk about three camera features that you can use to improve low light photography, right? ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. Josh?
Thanks for that, Dinesh. But before we get started, I want to make sure that you all know to like, share, and subscribe to the Sony Connected channel. Because remember, the Connected channel here is this channel is here for you. So if there's any future type of episodes that you want to see for a certain type of products or features of those products, definitely let us know in the chat below. But we are live right now. So I just want to say hi, love from Detroit. Thank you, Relentless. Just want to just say hi out there. But yeah, put any questions that you have for us in the chat, and we'll get to you guys as soon as we can. Okay. Back to you, brother.
Absolutely. We'll definitely try to answer them all. If we can't get you an answer, we'll definitely get back with you. Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So how many of you have run into a situation where you're at a concert or at a party and you're trying to take pictures and sometimes the environment's too dark and you're not getting that image, or the image becomes blurred because your hands move? Well, that's something that we all run into, right? So today we're going to break it down and talk about three things that's going to make that improvement, right? Is ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. Now, before we get started, very important thing that I want to make sure you guys understand is when you're shooting using an alpha camera and you're trying to make this adjustment, make sure your camera is not on auto mode. Either put it on manual or program mode, which will then allow you to make these adjustments, right? So let's talk about ISO. ISO refers to camera sensitivity to light, right? Higher the ISO setting means the sensor is more sensitive to light, allowing the camera to take pictures in dark condition, right? A lower ISO setting means a sensor is less sensitive and giving you better image quality, but requires a lot more light to capture that clear image. Right. Whenever you're shooting in low light, try to have a baseline. When I normally shoot in low light, I try to use an ISO of 1600 as my baseline, then move up and down depending on what I'm trying to capture on that. And I usually find that that's 1600 tends to work very well without giving me a lot of digital noise or grain. Yeah. Sony cameras do have a dedicated dial for ISO to make your usage much more simplified. And there's actually on your right hand side thumb at the bottom, you'll see it says ISO. You just click on it and then spin the dial, and you can make those adjustments on that. So a couple of things that I want to show you is I found some pictures, example of Sony artists who have used different ISO speeds to capture image, right? Anywhere from ISO 20 to 12,800. And one of the images that I liked was where there's a sunset, sunrise, and you're trying to capture that, water, and all the different shades of the sunrise. In this particular case, we're able to take that ISO down to 20 and shutter speed at 1/16th, 1,600 of a second, and capture that image. But the really cool picture that I was surprised with, and I've always tried shooting this type of photos, and I was always running a challenge till I spoke, I looked at this artist, Sony artist that captured this, and it gave me, a lot of great ideas, is this bridge that's lit up at nighttime. And what the artist did is put the camera on a tripod and put the ISO at 1600 shutter, 1/13th of a second, and was able to capture. And as you can see in this image, not only it's highlighting the lights on the bridge, but if you look at the background, you have a beautiful, a city line that also highlights without overexposing the bridge or the background on that. And the really nice thing, Josh, what I learned was don't be afraid of shooting high ISO, especially if you're in a dark situation. That grain sometimes can be helpful in a situation. So like in this particular photo, the camera ISO was set at 12,800 and shutter speed at 1/25. And what it did is it took this girl's face, and you can see how you have different glitter on her cheeks, lips, and her eyebrows that are highlighting on that. And even the digital noise is blended into the background because it's completely black on that. So keep in mind, when shooting photos, you're always going to have to make adjustments, right? And play around with your settings. So it doesn't rely only on ISO, but you also have to adjust your shutter speed and aperture. They all work together. And we'll talk about how you can make those adjustments with adjusting the shutter speed and aperture here soon. Josh, how are we doing?
We're doing good, actually. We got a couple little comments in the chat. Relentless making some very fun comments if we did some competition against another competitor, which would be nice as well. But we'll see if that happens. But
Yeah.
I definitely want to say like something I did understand from everything that you were talking about. ISO, how sensitive your sensor is to the light. Realistically, you want to really realistically look at where you're going to be taking these photos and or videos, so you can adjust accordingly, but also identify what type of cameras are going to be probably the better ones for you. Because when you do go into a very bright setting, like that first photo we had of us shooting, looking at a sunset or sunrise, this type of situation with a lot of that light, you wouldn't want to have a really, really high ISO. You want to keep it as low as you can, even if it's midday. That's still gonna be a lot of light. You want to keep it in those hundreds, much lower. But then when you go into, like you did say, don't be afraid of those extreme low lights. In that last photo, you had the young lady in a very controlled setting where it's very, very dark, but you put a little bit of fluorescent stuff on her, so it can really show those highlights. So in these cases right here, you can really get a really amazing creative look depending on what you're looking for in those photos and or videos.
Absolutely. That. So that brings me to my second topic, Josh, is shutter speed, right? Shutter speed is the amount of time the camera shutter stays open, allowing the light to hit sensor and create an image, right? So it's affecting both the brightness and the motion capture. As you can see, I have a picture where you're trying to take a picture of the sky. And in this particular case, the camera was put on a tripod, and it was opened up to 15-minute shutter, allowing the camera to capture the Milky Way, all the stars, all the lights that hit the image, to all the way taking it to water droplets, right? Is a lot of times, you're taking a picture of rain and stuff like that, and you want to capture, each rain droplet. Going to 1,000 of a second, you can actually now freeze those raindrops and letting you see exactly where they fall or the previous drops fell. So it's all about having fun with it and making those adjustments on how you want that image to look on that. So with fast shutter speed, when you freeze motion, it creates a really cool artifacts, right? So one of the pictures that I found from a Sony artist was he was shooting some skateboarder at a skate park, and he was able to use 8,000 of a shutter speed to freeze that image, where you can not only see where the whole park where he's skating, but you can actually see the skateboard, how high it's off the ground, and how he's able to flip it. So these are some of the things that we can do with the creative adjustments on that. Also, you can take that shutter speed down to 16th hundred of a second and have an example where you have people, there are triathlons that are coming out of ocean running after their swim, and as they're running through the water, you can see the water being splashed, and using the 16th of 1600 of a second, we're able to freeze that water and splashing, on that to create that emotion on that. But the best one I really love when it comes to shutter speed is the bird. This bird is sitting on a nest and it takes off and it flies, and using a high shutter speed, we're able to freeze that image where you can actually see all the wing span, all the different shades, all the colors, all the detail on that bird. So those are some of the things that you can do by adjusting the shutter speed. And how are we doing, Josh?
We're doing good. We actually got some people in the chat right now. Before I give my little one-two about shutter speed, just want to point out, yes, Marvelous. I love sun. He loves taking photos of sunrise and sunsets. He has an A7 Mark III,
That's
and yeah,
awesome.
much love, right? And much
Yeah.
love coming from the chat as well. I really greatly appreciate it. If you guys can, actually, just a little question for the chat. Previously, we talked about ISO, and right now we're talking about shutter speed. So shutter speed is like Dinesh did mention, how quick that shutter is open or closed. So at those higher shutter speeds, you're able to do a much easier quick stop motion. And then for longer exposures, you can do different things like I've personally done back in the day, which is called like light writing, where you keep your exposure open for a long period of time. You take a flashlight and you go and start just moving it in front of the frame. And for example, this photo right here I took when I was at a park down in San Diego, and it was really cool. I started from the right side of the frame. I walked all the way over, and it gave a really interesting creative look. So this is one of those techniques people use when they try to write their names with lights, or they try to get the what I call invisible car look. But they just show the lights right there. But
That's a
I
great,
want to give
Josh. That's a phenomenal
right.
picture. I love that picture. It reminds me of a couple of
Thank you.
movies out there.
Well, really quickly, but I just want to give a question to the chat. If you guys can put some cameras in the chat, some hybrid Sony cameras that you think that will be great for low light and for speed. With that, I'll give that back to you, Dinesh.
Thank you. And with that brings my third topic, topic, aperture, right? Aperture has several effects on photography. So perhaps the most obvious is the brightness or the exposure of your image. So when you think about aperture, think of it as like your eyes, right? Is the pupil in your eyes. When it's dark at nighttime, your pupils open up at the maximum opening, allowing a lot more light to come through, allowing you to see in low light. And during daytime, your pupils shrink, allowing less light to come in, giving you, so you're not squinting on that. So that is, in short, an aperture works on that. And then taking that aperture and not only increasing the amount of light, but adjusting the depth of field. Now, what happens is when you open up that aperture all the way, you're going to be able to highlight your subjects in one specific area and then still be able to see the background in more soft focus. Like personally, when I'm taking photos, I usually like to use my G Master 50 millimeter 1.8, and I find that that lens gives me a lot of flexibility when I'm taking portraits and things like that, where I'm able to defocus my background and be able to capture images, right? And I find a lot of wedding photographers, and they tend to use that because it works really well. And also in low light, I can take some great photos without having to use a flash on that. I do have a couple of pictures that I load that I found from Sony Creator. Is this one where you have this young girl on a stage, right, performing. Normally, when we're on, when we go, watch, our kids present, dance on the stage, or we're watching any event, they always tell us don't use flash photography, right? So when you're not able to use flash, that's when you're able to, when you use a fast lens, like in this particular case, an f2.8 at ISO of 1600, you're able to capture that natural image and be able to see all the details, right? The lights reflecting through the, background and the foreground on that. Or using even a faster lens, like a G Master f1.4, where I have this picture where the lady's sitting, outdoors at a restaurant or something, and you see a lot of, there's light hitting her face and just creating this ambiance with a tremendous amount of lights in the background. And by going to an f1.4 with ISO 100, what it's doing is creating this natural image without using the flash and get affecting the all the lights in the background. So this is something that I really like using, and that's where fast lenses come in. And my favorite is taking food pictures. My wife has me take so many food pictures. Every time we go to restaurants, we got to take a photo, right? And in this particular case, the lens was at f2.8 at ISO 400. And what it was doing, it was keeping the main course in perfect focus and highlighting that cold, chilled wine glass, with white wine. But yet, can't forget that salad, right? Because you got to eat healthy on that. So it gives you, not only lets you see what everything that's on the table, but it also highlights the key food that you're trying to highlight. That. How are we doing, Josh? Any questions?
Question in the chat. We only have one question from Lydia. Essentially, what were the settings that we took with that light writing and lens? I used a 55 Sony E-mount lens, 1.8. So kind of on that subject of aperture and fast lenses, exactly like Dinesh was talking about, certain lenses can definitely help out in different situations.
Yeah.
To kind of speak about, I'll speak a little bit more about that other situation in a little bit. And one of the other big benefits, other than a fast lens and a long exposure, of why it worked out so well.
Yeah.
But to kind of recap a little bit, since we're kind of at that third point right now,
Yeah.
When it comes to aperture, it's really depicting on the lens. So that this part right here is going to depend more on whichever type of lens you decide to get. So you can get some of those really great optic G Master lenses where you get that edge to edge sharpness, and the best focal lengths, best, optics. We're up to around, 80 lenses or so now. So
Yes.
At the time of this video. So with that, you have a lot of different options, because in situations like you did mention, say you're at a recital and sometimes, or you're just you're in an indoor event where you can't do flash photography. Going for a little bit faster of a lens, you don't have to go for the most expensive, but going for a faster lens like a 1.8, a 2.8, something like that, with a little bit of proper lighting, you can still be able to get a good photo indoors. And then especially with the nice shallow depth of field, depending on how fast that lens is, if you go for a really nice lens at 1.4, that's where that second photo comes into play, where you get that really creamy bokeh or a blurry background effect, where it's able to identify, and identify.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
with that, aperture is absolutely fantastic. But is there anything else that you wanted to point out before we give the little bit of the wrap up right now?
No, one thing is anytime you're doing low light shooting, always try to carry a tripod with you because it's your best friend.
Perfect. And with that, I'm actually going to start with your best practice, because that was actually the best practice that I used to take that photo, that light writing photo. So realistically, tripod, make sure it's stable. If you can use a remote control shutter, that will definitely help out as well, but longer exposure. So keeping that exposure open for 15, 20, 30 seconds, you play with it depending on your settings. But that's how you can get those type of shots. But continuing with the wrap up, essentially your first point that we talked about today was ISO. It's going to be part of that exposure triangle right there. ISO is how sensitive your sensor is to the light. So if you are going to be taking pictures outdoors where it's going to be very bright, or in a very bright setting, maybe at like a sunset that we had mentioned before, or it's just very bright out, you want to lower that ISO so it's not so sensitive. But then there may be other situations where you may need to crank it up just a little bit. So where you are in very low light situations, where you're indoors, you have stuff where, like we had the photo of the bridge, which is a really good one, where you didn't have to go to the full extreme of, I got to crank this camera all the way to its full ISO, but it just needs that little bit of help. So that's the other thing, is as long as you have a really great, hybrid camera with a amazing probably backside illuminated sensor, it may do a much better job at identifying that low light capability. Absolutely. And last but not least is aperture. Aperture, which is going to be essentially kind of like the opening and closing of the iris of the lens, almost like the iris of the eye, where it dilates and constricts to make sure that it's able to focus on certain depths of field, so it can have certain things in focus or everything in focus if need be. But with that. And with that, that's essentially our wrap up for low light shooting. Would you like to take us out, Dinesh?
Absolutely. Well, that's all from us. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Right? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. Also remember to register your Sony products to get even more simple tips and tricks. Right? And if you need more information on your Sony products, you can always and Josh. And don't forget to put any future questions or topics you'd like to hear in the comments below. Okay. Thank you for watching this episode, and Sony Simplified. We'll see you next time.
Later, y'all.
Bye.